Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 11 kilometers per second. 11 kilometers per second is the speed at which something must move in order to escape Earth's gravity. And so this is a metaphor for the things that you must do to overcome the two biggest things that hold you back. And ultimately, what that boils down to is fear of judgment from others and fear or our aversion to pain, which ultimately comes off as our aversion to work. Anything that changes our equilibrium, anything that makes us do something that we are not currently used to is work. And so those are the two things that hold you back. Those are the two things that keep you from soaring to the heavens, which is, I believe, our intended purpose here: to accomplish something, to create, to add our own piece of genius to this grand scheme of things, this beautiful puzzle. And so today, what I want to talk about is how to reprogram yourself for the upcoming tough times. I've talked about this before in other episodes. We are in for some really tough times coming up, starting with 2025. With the Trump administration, I've talked about this, and, folks are, increasingly alarmed in the kind of things that Trump is doing. Trump is the kind of person who is a narcissist and who is taking steps ultimately that he does not think about the impact of what is happening. He has a whole bunch of folks who are running around who, now are able to use somebody who is not ideological, and their own ideologies they're able to now pass on about things that they think should happen. How, for example, Elon Musk, how things should be more efficient and things of that nature, and all good and great because, we have done a lot of damage to our own economy and our own infrastructure in the ways that we are moving. And there is a correction that needs to happen. But, as smart individuals, the reason why we are, like this whole idea of a free market economy essentially is just chaos. Like, if you really boil down to true free market, true, laws of the jungle, ultimately, it's like whatever it is that folks want. You're talking about what typically happens in third world nations. It's like, the ones with the power, right? And law of the jungle, it's whoever the powerful is that wins. And so the idea of coming together and saying, hey, we would like to make a society that's more equitable, that considers the fact that we have little control over some things, but there are some things that we can do to make sure that whomever it is that ends up being in an unfortunate position will not necessarily suffer too poorly. It's that same reason that we would come together and look at what can potentially go wrong and look at the need for the correction and say, instead of allowing it to happen, however, and potentially suffer losses in an amount that is greater than necessary, we can do this in a way that is controlled. We can say, okay, let's do it this way. We'll get some suffering. Some people will be impacted by this. There's no way around it. So for example, whenever there's new technology, there are people who are going to lose their jobs, right? There's no way around suffering. But let's do this in a systematic way that allows us to spread it out, maybe over a longer period of time, and also make sure that we're not, going through extreme pain. And so right now we have a group of folk who are saying, let's just do it all at the same time. Let the chips fall where they may. And obviously those are the folks, the Elon Musk of the world, the billionaires of the world, who will not necessarily suffer. And so why not? And so interesting. I was listening to a Tom Bilyeu episode today with Whitney Elise. If you Google Whitney Elise, investigative journalism, her middle name is Elise. Her last name is not coming to me right now at the moment. But if you Google her, she has a book that I've got on my wish list. I'm waiting for my my credits to renew on Audible so I can order it and listen to it. But it's the title is something about blackmail, and it's about, you know, how the elite are basically just criminals. And she does this in a way that, because I'm a skeptic and I've heard a lot of different people talk about these conspiracy theories, but she does it in a way that shows you the evidence about how these elite folks are out there doing nefarious things to people under the guise of de-risking. Ultimately, what that means is, for those that are in power, they don't want the risk of, you know, crime, the risk of war, the risk of downturns. And so what they have done in the name of de-risking is they have taken steps that ultimately lead to consequences for those who, you know, are just basically like the puppets and the pawns. And a lot of them literally say and mean this. And this is why it's important that we not be asleep. Like the 5%ers, you know, if you guys have heard of this group, it is a branch of philosophy slash religion, probably religion, because I do believe they believe in God. But the 5%ers, they they say, this is a big thing that they say. It's like, you know, there is a 10%, 90%. Let me make sure my math is right. I think it's 5%. So they're the 5%. Let's work our way backwards from that. I know they're the 5%ers. The 5%ers are the folks who are actually conscious. You know, these are the folks who actually are aware of the things that are taking place. They're aware that, you know, that there are puppeteers out there controlling what's going on. And then there's the 10%. The 10% are actually the elite group. I'd venture to say that they're much smaller than 10% of the population. I'd say they're 1%. There's a lot in the 9% who think. I think Tom Bilyeu happens to be one of those who are in the 9%. He's super wealthy, but has no idea what these folks who are in BlackRock and all these other guys who are, you know, the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, who even the George Soros, as she talks about it, who are like controlling things. And again, I'm a skeptic, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But the read the book. Matter of fact, give me 1 second. Whitney Elise Webb book. Whitney Elise Webb is her name, and the book is called One Nation Under Blackmail. One Nation Under Blackmail. Can't wait to read that, because for all of those of us who are like, oh God, you guys are ridiculous and silly, and that was me. Like, I'm listening to these folks because they, like, a lot of them are unhinged, and the stuff that they're saying is the kind of stuff that you would hear from, you know, Trump supporters and, you know, Pizzagate folks, you know. And it's kind of like, come on, bro. Like, you have no evidence for this. This woman, this investigative journalist, has come through with evidence about the things that are taking place. If you don't get the book, at the very least, go watch that Tom Bilyeu episode. Look for Tom Bilyeu, Bilyieu, I believe, and look for Whitney Elise Webb, 2 B's. And you will see that episode, and you can sit and listen to how she outlines what is taking place. So I say this to say to you, man, these people are out here controlling things, and we are like ants to them. This is about, like, and they're getting their way in a world that's increasingly global, like the corporate interests and things of that nature. We need to prepare ourselves, and there are multiple ways for us to do that. And I think the first step is for us to get our mindset right. We need to reprogram. Yes, there are skills that need to be gotten, but ultimately the folks who are running things, you know, are running it for multiple reasons, right? There's various reasons why they got here, but I think it's 2 big things, right? One is the mindset, which is, you know, that there's a certain level of beliefs, right? The beliefs determine your perspective on the world, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing that you get either because you have had the experience, you have grown through the ranks. There are few and far, I believe, that gets it that way, but it happens. But a lot of them get it because they inherited it from folks. I mean, there are a few, I think. So for example, well, I don't know what the numbers are. I would say that Elon Musk maybe worked his way up there. Like it's a kid from South Africa who got a visa and came here and made some things happen. So it's largely possible for you to go out and do it specifically as a white male. I don't know so much for anyone else. I don't know too many who have made it to those levels who are other than white men. So, there is a level of this that makes it very difficult for you to get to that point, of the elite status point. I mean, at the very least, you can make some money. But like I said, Tom Bilyeu is a person who's making this type of money, had no idea that this thing is taking place. You have to, have a perspective maybe built through the fact that you're in finance. A lot of them happen to be in finance, and these guys think they run the world. Like Jamie Dimon said infamously not too many years ago, around 2008, the financial crisis, that he was doing God's work. And so, yeah, when you have that kind of power, you are kind of doing God's work. You're, putting your stamp on the world. And, it's just unfortunate that what we do, too many. I mean, there are a lot of people, who do a lot of things that were good, right? Like the Rockefellers and all those things. Like, there was a lot of philanthropy in the United States. And so there are a lot of people who have done good, but like there is also, people talking about the oligarchs. Oligarchs are just a group of wealthy people who are, whose interests and the influence on the government for their interests essentially is kind of like the ruling class. And so that has been that way, I think, for a long time before in American history, before Roosevelt. This is definitely the way that it runs in, developing nations. And, we're heading in that direction. The whole idea of the middle class and what was done after World War II with, and with the New Deal and all that good stuff, that looks like it's going away. And so we are about to go and enter some hard times. And again, to bring it back, the big piece of this is mindset. Okay, how are you one that is going to be controlled? And it's so much easier now, like so crazy, man. Like the stuff that we talked about, that people talked about in 1984, where there are thought police. We're going to get to the point where that is possible, where they can actually read your thoughts. Like, and that may happen for, through different means. One is probably because they can read facial features and heart rate and all that good stuff, see, or, maybe infrared light can see, like, if you're getting hot and all that good stuff. But also there is literally, like, they're creating ways for you to get brain scans so that you can see essentially what you're thinking, so that essentially you can control things through thought. But then once I'm able to control things through thought, I'm also able to see exactly what you might be thinking. I can, think backwards about it. In any case, again, mindset. So let's talk about mindset. All right, mindset is controlled by beliefs. So let's systematically go through this. So your mindset is controlled by beliefs, which your beliefs determines your perspective. Your perspectives has everything to do with how you experience the world, how the world seems to you, and the kind of avenues you go out to pursue. So that's why it's so important. Now, it's not completely within our control at this point. Like, I mean, obviously, it's possible, but there's going to be very few folks who are coming in from like a country like Sudan, for example, and start to rule the world, right? Like how would that happen? Obviously they can quote unquote rule the world like Elon Musk does, in a sense, right? Like develop something and get to a level of power where they can influence. But then how likely is it that the powers that be would allow a Sudanese person to get that kind of level of power, even if they were to get to that point, right? But that person may have a lot of influence. They certainly, at this point, could not be the president of the United States like Trump. So it's not like you can control everything. But there is a large part of what you are able to do in this world, I believe, that is based on your mindset, which ultimately start with beliefs and then determines your perspective. So in that sense, the two things that, you can have perspectives on so many different things, but again, the two things that we focus on that I believe are the things that allow you to succeed has to do with your aversion to pain, or in this case, what I'm talking is work. Like your perspective on work is one of them. And then the other one is your perspective on yourself, which is what causes fear in one way or another, but ultimately it's your perspective on yourself. So the two things are your perspective on work, ultimately, and then your perspective on yourself. All right. So those two are determined by beliefs, which I'm going to tackle so you can have the correct belief that allows you to have, correct belief, the belief that will allow you to have the perspective that allows you to succeed in these times. And then so we'll address the beliefs, and then for work and for yourself. And then from there, I will address two things within your perspective on yourself. The first on the perspective of yourself is who you are able to be, who you can be. The second on your perspective on yourself is how your orientation towards others, how you think about others, right? Others in your circle, others, people in the world, ultimately. Okay, so let's start first with your perspective on work. Okay, so when I say your perspective on work, I mean, what do you think about work, right? So a lot of people might think that, and increasingly so in the world that we live in, the world where tough men, as they say, or I think the saying goes, tough men create good times create soft men, or hard men create good times. Hard men, pause. But no, so tough men create good times create soft men create bad times create hard men. And the cycle goes on. We're about to hit a cycle where the soft people that we have become because of the good times, the long good time that we have had, is about to get turned over. And we got the soft men running around thinking they know everything, and they're about to make some tough times for us. But what we have in this world is, back in the days, this whole idea that we have weekends is a new concept. The idea of 40-hour work week is a new concept. Like, people used to get up and work all the time. The only thing that was probably older than more recent is probably the idea of, the Sabbath, where you don't work on the Sabbath. Keep the Sabbath, is an old thing. It's as old as Christianity. And so as old as Judaism. So that's pretty old. But, the idea of like work to a certain time, and, that was foreign. That's foreign. Like, yes, we've always had folks who, whose parents conquered a part and became king. And then they said, hey, son, you get to now be the king. And those guys like lived kingly lives. But everyone else, the rest of the people in the world, work was just the thing that happened, right? Until now, the way that we think about life as if we are entitled to it, like we are born on this earth with the right to chill. We are here to chill. Like we are literally put on an earth with like nothing. Like, like if you think about human beings and any other animal, it's like You're born. Go figure it out. That's it. Like, no tools, no nothing. You're born, go figure it out. In the savannas of Africa, it's like, okay, go figure it out. Now I gotta be like, okay, what can I eat? Is this thing going to kill me or not? That I just gathered, or is this animal going to kill me or not? Okay, I gotta, create some spirits. Like, we literally are just put on here and to work. Like, that's what we're put on here to work. And so, but nowadays there's perspective that we have as soft people is that we are here to come in and chill. And we wanting that so badly for ourselves are trying to give it to our kids. And I know that this is something that I am guilty of. And because we want it for ourselves. And the reason we want it for ourselves is because we are programmed to be motivated through through pain and pleasure, right? It's pain and pleasure. So we, not knowing anything, as we're learning as we go, feel pleasure from the things that give us pleasure. And we're like, okay, well, I want more of that. We also feel pain, and we said, okay, well, I need less of that. And so whatever it is that we can do to lessen the pain and increase the pleasure, we go out and pursue that. And because of our big brains, we are increasingly able to do that. We first make it easier for us to eat, which gives us pleasure, which takes away the pain. Like, we don't have to sit there and scour around anymore. We produce agriculture to the point where now we create so much food that most of the world is fat, especially US and Mexico. But so that's what we've done, and that's all good and great. But look this up. If you ever look for the concept of pain and pleasure and dopamine, which is associated with like pleasure. There are a lot of other neurochemicals in our brains that release pleasure, or that is associated with pleasure. But dopamine is the big one that folks focus on. But in any case, if you go do some research, if you're inclined to do so you don't think that I'm just making this up, like our pain and pleasure systems in the brain are like interconnected. They're kind of like a scale, like one goes up, one goes down. So ultimately, like, if you have pleasure, you can expect some pain coming back on the other side. Because that's just the nature of how it works. If you get pain, you're going to get pleasure. So one of the things that folks have learned is if you go out and do one of these ice bath deep plunges type thing, when you get out, you are going to feel like a sense of elation, like this kind of pleasure. Here's another thing though that folks have figured out now that we're able to see a lot more into what's happening for pain and pleasure within our brain, is that, like addiction, if you start focusing and more on pleasure, your baseline, that means what you find to be your equilibrium pleasure point, gets to be higher. Right? Meaning you have to do more now. The things that used to give you pleasure here, because you're constantly getting that thing, like if you're getting a drug, if you're getting a drug and you keep on getting that drug, eventually your tolerance grows to that drug, and it no longer brings you that same pleasure. You need more of it. And it gets to a point where you're just now, in order to just feel for the drug, in order to just feel normal, you have to just keep on hitting that pleasure button with that drug. It's the same thing with any kind of pleasure that we get. This is why folks are bored, got ADHD and all this other stuff. It's like, we in the past could have gone out for a walk, right? And literally smelled the roses and have so much pleasure, like the sunshine. There's so many who are not able to appreciate it because we're in a constant state of dopamine search. Constant state of dopamine search. So, what do we do about that? Well, we have to now understand the perspective. This is why I'm trying to, address the belief that you're here to experience pleasure and no pain. And so what I'm saying to you here is, instead of us continuously trying to seek pleasure, we need to be okay knowing that what we're doing, what we're here for, is to get the balance of pleasure by doing the work. And so, yes, there is an aversion to work and pain, but if you want pleasure, you have to go out and get and do work. That's what the balance does. If you want to get pleasure, you have to go out and do work. And so now, if you have that as your perspective, then you will know that, yes, this is going to suck, but it's what I have to do to get to the other side, to get the pleasure, to ultimately get to what I want. So that's the first belief. Now, let's address the second belief. It's about yourself. I said there are two things with respect to belief about yourself. It's who you can be and your orientation with the world. So who you can be. I addressed this in the previous episode. So if you want, you can go there and get a full explanation of, what I said with respect to who you can be. But ultimately, in brief, what it is that a lot of times we feel like we are being fake. I called it, it's been known as the imposter syndrome, particularly when it comes to professional work. But ultimately, it's anywhere where we are and we don't feel like we can behave in a certain way. Like the battle, the wrestling that we do with authenticity, right? Who am I truly? I'm starting to behave like this person, but this is not who I truly am. Who should I be? And all that stuff, all of that is still the same thing. Like, we question and doubt whether or not we can show up as a certain thing. And my thing is, ultimately, that is holding your ass back. All right? Because you have to decide who you want to be. You have to not care. Like, the people who have in this world been admired by us, the Madonnas of the world, the Andy Warhols, even now, the Kanye Wests of the world, are those who are like not willing to be put in a box. They do not operate within the archetypes that folks have given them. Like, I guess you can say archetype is like, just crazy and wild. But what I mean is, like, here are the boxes that they say is acceptable. And they're like, I'm not going to do that. And so these are the types of folks who are going to be both, crazy and fun, but also serious when they want to, all of that good stuff. I don't have to be one thing or another. And so here's the thing. It's like, whatever it is that the people who are the most bold, the people who are the most admired, are the ones who show up in multiple different ways. And I can imagine that when they first started behaving that way, the way that is, seen as different than another way that some people may take them, they probably got some stares and some eyes and all that good stuff. And they said, this is who I am. I'm going to continue to be it. And that level of understanding of, I don't need your permission to go be this character. This is what I feel within myself, right? This is what I feel within myself. I don't need your permission. And whether or not you think I act, I embody that well is your problem, not mine. I'm not really concerned about it, so I'm going to go and be it. And I think I want to say commitment, but it's not even commitment really. It could be like, if you're specifically saying, here's who my persona is, here's who I think that I am, and I'm going to go out and set out to do that, then it's a commitment to go out and do that. Like, day after day you wake up doing that. But ultimately it's a belief that this is who I am, and to hell with what you think. Which brings me to the second point. So the first, just to reiterate and to make sure that I'm hitting the point, is you have to understand that A, we all are playing a role, right? And B, that whatever role you decide that you want to play, you don't need anybody's permission. Too often we're going in and asking for permission. Do you think I'm this person? Or you don't think I'm this person? I'm not. Oh, could you please accept me as this person? Or more than anything else, we just won't play it. It's like, okay, this is how I approached you, right? This is what I said who I said I was. Okay, you've accepted that. as who I am, right? Well, then that's the only thing that I can play. And if I now start playing anything different, you're like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're acting out of character. Okay, well then let me recoil. Let me pull it back. Let me not, upset your belief about who I am that I helped you believe based on the fact that I was playing another role. So we're all playing a role, and if the other role that you want to play, the archetype that you want to play is that of a ruler, a person who owns companies, a person who does that, then you have to set out to go and do that. It doesn't mean, and this is the thing where I think a lot of folks, who are skeptics like myself, who have had a very difficult time accepting this, get it wrong, is that the people who talk about manifesting and all that good stuff, they make it seem like it is a thought and then you become it, right? I think it, therefore I am. It's like magic. It's not really, there's a magic in it, right? There's a magic in it, but it's not necessarily I think it and then the money just pours into my account and then all of a sudden people see me that way. That's not how it works. The magic in it is because you believe it and you show up every day, people have no other choice but to say, well, he said he was this guy and he keeps on doing what this guy does. So clearly he is this guy. It's because you believe you're that guy that you keep on doing what this guy does, and you show up every day doing what this guy does. And eventually there is no way for somebody to say you're not this guy. You're doing what this guy does. So what makes you this guy other than the fact that you do what this guy does? And so that's the magic in it. And so that means that you have to believe it enough not to pull back, to keep showing up and doing what this guy does every day. So that's number two. Number three, that's number one. Number two is your orientation with the world, which actually is part of the reason we do not pull back when people are looking at us and thinking, wait, this is not you. And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what we can learn from the narcissist, right? And that is essentially the focus on what we want, what we feel about ourselves that is positive, right? That what we feel about ourselves that is positive as opposed to what the other person is thinking. That is what allows us to keep showing up. It's what allows us to stay confident, not even confident. I would say, well, confident is probably the right term, but I feel like it's not powerful enough, right? I would say that is what allows us to be powerful in what it is that we believe and how we present ourselves. We can present ourselves as confident. Person comes in and you can tell he's confident, right? He's just having a conversation. He is not thwarted, but he can just be quietly confident, right? Or he can just be confident through demeanor, through, that's quietly confident through, his command for the subject matter that he's speaking about. But he can also be confident with respect to the passion that he exudes. That's the energy that drives people. It's the passion. And the reason why you get that level of passion is because you are thinking only about the good in you, like the positive in you. I got more. I'm coming. So what the difference between a narcissist, an asshole, and a naive / like a quixotic person. Quixotic is an interesting word from Don Quixote. Don Quixote was basically like a story about a delusional person who believed he was fighting monsters and really he was just fighting windmills or something like that. But in any case, that's where quixotic comes from. It's like, the delusional people. Well, the person that comes to mind right now is that woman who is from New York who's in Pakistan. right now is like, yes, I keep up with all the freaking shenanigans in pop culture, specifically in Shade Room. But any case, what the hell am I saying? Okay, so what the difference between an asshole, a narcissist, and or the similarities and difference. I'm going to talk about what is similar and different about them, right? What's similar for all three of them is that they are not focused on what your thoughts are. That is not their focus, right? This is essentially the same thing that happens when you're drunk. When you're inebriated, they call it removing the inhibitions. What ultimately is happening is you're shutting down the voice that's telling you to focus on your own flaws. Like, what are you? All your concerns is all shut down. Now, the only thing that you're concerned about is what is good about you. For most people, there are some people, I guess, who I don't know them. Certainly is not me. Most people who get drunk and lose their inhibitions are like, thinking about all the great things about themselves, and they're only thinking about all the great things, right? Now, so that's when your inhibitions go down, and it's essentially when you're not focused on the things that you find to be flaws about yourself, right? And so a asshole is kind of, and also it's kind of like I would say it's on a continuum for an asshole specifically, but not really. But I said it's on a continuum, so let me explain. It's on a continuum of kind of like Asperger's syndrome, where you're not clued in to what people are feeling, right? You can't really understand and empathize with people, right? Empathy is a programming that we have. That's part of what makes us social beings. It's what makes dogs social beings. Dogs have evolved from wolves to essentially be friendly. Like, the dog's best friend thing is like they literally can smell your fear. They can, they have these faces, these puppy dog faces to get you to like them, and they can understand and feel what you're feeling, type of thing. And it's that empathy that we have for one another too that gets us to be social beings. It's what allows us also not to offend, since we can't read minds, such that we won't get thrown out of the social group and have to go fend for ourselves. So it's needed, because we can't, we're not animals that can, survive ultimately for the most part by ourselves. And so that is a tool, a programming that's necessary. So we have empathy, and so there's a lack of it in a sense for these individuals. I would say it's different because both an asshole and a narcissist probably has it, whereas an asshole, right, they do have the sense of empathy. They can sense it, whereas an asshole has for whatever reason the social skills was lacking, and so they have within themselves the understanding that it's okay to respond in a way that a lot of people will find to be offensive, and it's where it comes from. They haven't learned that their response to things that they do is going to offend someone. A narcissist, so in that case, an asshole will do it to everybody, right? Asshole will be an asshole to people who are high up, people who are on their same level, and people who they feel like they're higher than. They just say asshole shit. Then they're narcissists. Narcissists can be assholes, but because they do know, they're not really thinking about you, but they do know the impact of the things that they're saying. And because narcissists tend to be folks who are, about winning, right? The lack within a narcissist is like the void that they're trying to fill is the need to be liked, right? Or the need to win in some way. And, that is also, that's making them think that they're liked, or that's making them think that they're worthy, ultimately. is that big void that they're constantly trying to fill, that they're worthy. It's like, okay, well, I need to win. And as a result, they know at times who they can be assholes to and who they can't. So, if you have no value to them, they might be an asshole to you. But if they know they have to curry favor with you, then they'll be the sweetest, kindest, if it's initially, for example, like they'll talk to you and they'll reel you in and all that good stuff. Well, all the while, they're not really concerned about you. They're just using what they know about you to ultimately win. But it's the same thing with a quixotic, naive person, right? Because they don't really know. They're entered into a realm where they don't know what the social cues are. They don't know what they should know. They now are behaving in a way that would otherwise, other people who know what the norms are, who know what the rules are and what they should and shouldn't do, they stop themselves from doing it. But I don't know that this is, I didn't know the rules. I didn't know that I could not go past, this is out of bounds. So they go out of bounds. And so the same thing happens is ultimately they're not concerned with your thoughts, right? So here's another example of this before I ultimately elaborate on why this is important. If you've ever encountered someone who you thought was stereotypically or by the standards of beauty that we have said to be beautiful, right? That person, like any other person, is going to have flaws that they themselves are concerned about. But because in your mind, and you yourself you have noticed it. In fact, there are plenty of times when that person is not anywhere near a perfect person, a perfect 10, for example. And so, but at the same time, they have a lot of the qualities, right? And so you might approach that situation. No, you have approached that situation where, ultimately you would not have been intimidated in any way. But if you do get intimidated, it's because you show up to this interaction by thinking about your own flaws. What are the things that this person is noticing about me? Right? And so because you start focusing on your own flaws, you are now coming into this interaction in a way that you are communicating to that person that you are not as confident and powerful. You're not saying I have these flaws. You're just communicating it in that way. You're approaching it in such a way that you would not otherwise. Like, we're literally talking about human beings. So if we, for example, if that person was not as attractive as a person you found to be unattractive, you're not now focusing on your own flaws. Right? That's like the interaction where you would have a conversation with this human being and just be like, hey, here's all the things that I am. You are not now having, because that person you think is a attractive person. So now you start focusing on the flaws that ultimately you wouldn't otherwise focus on if it was somebody else. Right? And so that is to give you a clue about what it is that we're doing. This is the kind of thing that happens too when you have a person who, many times, most times, especially in our times, in a patriarchal patriarchy, many times what happens is that a man is permitted to not be thinking about their family. Right? There are a lot of women who do this as well, but like the thing that is has become acceptable is the man is not concerned about their family. They're not the ones a lot of times who are coming back and thinking about, okay, well, I need to make sure that I am there for my kids. I take them to, their sports. I do all those things. I don't have to be thinking about what your needs are. I need to be thinking about what my needs are. And my needs are to go out and, pursue this and do that and all this other stuff. And that allows you, when your mind is not on other people, when you're not thinking about what are the things that this person is looking at me wanting, wanting for me to do, because you're concerned only about your things, that is when you are now able to not feel any kind of twinge, any kind of guilt, any kind of twinge of guilt, any type of issues with moving in a particular direction and pursuing whatever it is that you want to do. So those are some of the examples that highlight this idea of what your orientation towards the feelings of other people are. And so with that understanding, what do you do? With that understanding, then, the understanding that you are sitting here concerning yourself with the thoughts that other people have of you is again, everything is awareness. You know that it is now when it's happening, you are like, you bring it to the conscious mind, from the cerebral, from the, the amygdala, which is like your animal brain. Like, it's something that's happening. It's like the shortcut that just operates on emotions. It's like, okay, I've associated this with threat. This person is a threat to me. And so now I need to now be fearful. It triggers the fear response. You can now take it from that to your frontal cortex, which is decision making part of your brain. You're like, oh, this is what's happening right now. I am experiencing this thing where I'm overly concerned about other people. And then there's only one thing to do now, is to say, I'm not going to do it. It's to push against your pattern, right? You push against your pattern. You have to tell yourself, listen, I don't need anybody's permission to behave and to be however I want. And quite frankly, the idea that I'm going to focus on my flaws, no, I'm going to focus on the dope shit about me. This is where you metaphorically think about the music, the soundtrack to your life. That is a tactic I would recommend, because ultimately, this is why I think they say, he dances to the beat of his own drummer. Because ultimately, we all have this soundtrack in our mind, the way that music makes us feel. When you are feeling like, yo, I'm on top of the world, there is a music that's playing in your head that triggers that idea of not just confidence, but powerful. Like, I am that guy. I am him or her, or whatever the case may be. Now, let me make this caveat for those of you who would do this and become assholes. There is a difference between behaving in a way that exudes passion, that shows that you're confident, that shows that you're powerful, that you don't mind sounding like the guy you are, in a person who is shitting on people, right? Who is being an asshole, ultimately is just covering up, right? So here's an example of how that would be, right? So you are now in front of this attractive person and you've noticed, oh my God, I feel intimidated. It's triggered fear response in me. So now this is typically what folks will do. Actually, it's happening, right? It happens as we speak, because they have actually noticed this, but they haven't gotten the appropriate way to respond to it. What they'll do is then they'll play these games. This is where you get the, don't call him until he calls you. This is where, you'll, a lot of times just be mean, like, oh, this reminds me, there was there's a balloon popping show that, a lot of you may or may not have seen, but this balloon popping show, it's like a dating game thing where one contestant, male or female, would show up, and then there's a whole slew of people of the opposite sex. So far, it's been people of the opposite sex who get to determine whether or not, who gets to convey whether or not they like this person on arrival. Like, he hasn't said anything. Well, sometimes on arrival they can indicate that they don't want them by popping their balloon. So they all have balloons and they can pop their balloons if he shows up and it's like, I don't even really like him. but they may keep their balloon. They may not pop their balloon and allow them to answer certain questions, and that would allow them to pop their balloon. And ultimately, at the end, they decide whether or not each of them, the person who hasn't popped their balloon and the contestant, gets to decide whether or not they move forward. In any case, what happened in this particular one that I just saw is that the guy shows up and well dressed, and everyone admitted, all the girls admitted that he was handsome, well dressed, and all this other stuff, and everybody had like some nitpicky thing to say about him. One was like, oh well, I don't like guys who show their ankles. The other one's like, oh, your pants were a little too tight. The other was like, well, you know what, you smiling, or you like smiles, and I don't like people who smile because I'm not a smiling person. And it was just the most ridiculous reasons for not picking somebody.
I popped my balloon because you are very fine down to the ankles.
I do what I can.
I just it's a pet peeve of mine when men wear pants that don't cover their ankles.
Okay.
So that was why I popped.
So why'd you end up popping your balloon?
He said the smile thing, and I'm not much of a smiler or a laugher. I'm more serious, so yeah. You won't really catch me smiling that much.
Why?
I
You don't want to smile?
No,
She's smiling right now.
I know, that's what I was like, why?
but you're very
I
handsome.
appreciate it.
That was unique, someone that's trying to
Yes, she is.
popped because of smiling. Like yours.
I know.
Your balloon because I think you're well dressed for yourself, but for me, I like someone that has like more of a baggy fit to their clothes. You look amazing, but for me, I like someone that has like an upscale streetwear style. That's pretty much why I think that walking together, our style just would clash. I mean, together today, we look amazing. Do you usually wear tight-fitted pants? Because for me, like, I like someone that has like a looser, baggy fit, like something that's like a little oversized.
I wear whatever I'm feeling.
Okay.
I'm not going to switch up the way that I dress myself for anybody, because I know I
As you
carry
shouldn't.
myself well and I dress well.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess it just ain't me.
Unfortunately, that is all of the balloons popped, but we do thank you for coming on.
And women say this all the time. Ultimately, what they say is that, you know, what I thought it was, and somebody said this as well, is like they felt intimidated and they didn't feel worthy of him. And so as a result, they just basically took themselves out, because it was like, I don't want the pressure of all of this, right? And so I say that to say, again, women say this all the time, like if like the you know, attractive women say they find that men are intimidated by them and they can't get on dates and things of that nature. And so I say that to say that what's happening these days when you're being an asshole, when you're not truly confident, is the response that you get is one where now you're potentially being mean as a way of saying, well, as a way of hiding the fact that you yourself are intimidated. And, you know, that does not mean that you think of yourself powerfully. You don't have to be an asshole to be powerful. You just speak as you would if you were not intimidated. Again, you would not be focusing on your own flaws. And so the idea is to not focus on your own flaws and focus on everything that is of quality about you. And whether or not that person sees it, you know, and this is a hard thing, but it is something that we actually do when we're able to do it. When we're drunk, there's probably somebody who is saying something that you would otherwise find offensive or otherwise be feel insecure about, that you don't, because you're not focused on it. You bounce because you are only concerned about your power, the music that's in your own head. And as a result, you don't have to respond by being less than that other person. You can respond magnanimously. You can respond confidently in a way that shows your ability to just sit and have fun. And so that's what I mean by what you can do as far as your orientation towards others. So a quick recap. You know, ultimately we have to reprogram ourselves for the coming hard times. And a big piece of that is going to be your mindset towards work, which I talked about. This is the reason why you need to fight through your aversion to work, because there's no other way that you're going to get the skills that is necessary for you to, not even the skills. I mean, you do need the skills to advance, but like literally, like you're just going to have to work your ass off and be okay with it and accept that, because shit's going to get tough. But so that's number one, reorient yourself towards, work and your perspective towards work. And therefore you will not suffer unnecessarily when hard times come, because they're coming. Two, address your mindset, which ultimately starts with beliefs, which shapes your perspective. And your perspective that is going to help you is one, again on work, which I just talked about. And then the other is on yourself, which I said is broken down into two things: who you can be, who you can choose to be without others people's permission, and two, your orientation towards others and how you think about them as compared to how you think about yourself. Yourself is who you need to be concerned about, and the only concern with yourself should be, as you are, your positive points, the things that make you powerful. Okay, you work on, if you're able to get those two things together, mindset and work, your perspective on work and mindset, the rest will come, because you will do the work. You will continue to be that person, and you will not be intimidated, and you will show up powerfully and energize and attract people to your energy. The rest will follow. Thank you for joining me once again. Like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.